Hi there, and welcome to like our first vibe coding class. And it's so nice to meet you. And before we would do anything, right, I need to put out a disclaimer. So if you don't like math or like science and physics and stuff like that, this might be like the most boring 10 minutes like of your life so far. But the most important thing is that even though you don't understand what things I'm about to say, it is important that you just listen to it, right? And as time goes on, at the end of the entire class, most of these things will make sense. But for now, they might sound a little bit gibberish, too much scientific and stuff like that. But just listen and just put your mind to it. And as time goes on, some of these things would make sense to you. So the first thing is like, we're not writing any code today, or we're not doing any vibe coding or stuff like that. I just want to take us down like memory lane, like they will say like in the beginning, right? And in the beginning, like if you look at software development, right, you've seen people that are you've watched like all these Aka movies and stuff like that. You've seen people that they'll be on a computer or their laptop or stuff like that, and you see them typing with their UDI and stuff like that. They're just typing and you're like, what are these guys doing? Like there's a black screen and there's a white text. You can see they're like typing gibberish and stuff like that. But if you've ever taken time to pause the movie and zoom out and look at their screen, you discover that you can actually read the things that they are seeing on that screen. It is most of those codes are just syntax, like series of instruction. For example, like a background. If you go to a header before, if you go to a website rather, and there's a part of the website that's called the header, that's the top part of the website. It's called an header. So if you want to write any code in that area, you just like something like an header. The background of the header should be red or blue or yellow. You know, if you just calm down, you discover that you can read those things that the developers are writing. So, but how then does the computer like understand these things? So that's where we have to go to the very basic part. So there's something called a transistor. So if you're playing game like in your phone before, if you've played game on your phone before, right, you notice that, or you're doing like a very intensive task, you notice that your phone or your laptop or whatever device you're using starts to get hot. But the most important thing you notice that if it's like your phone or your laptop, it is not even the battery part that is getting hot. It is mostly another part of the computer or the laptop or the phone. It is where the CPU is, because it is processing so much information at the same time. And in those places called like the CPU, there's something there called a transistor, right? That transistor or a chip, and that chip has like millions and billions of transistors in them, right? And it's that transistors that are performing those instructions. But the thing about transistors is that they have is off and on state. So a transistor can be either on or off, like, right? And that is what, so programmers now say, you know what, if it can be on and off, that means it can be zeros and one, right? And if you remember when we were in secondary school or primary school, there's something called binary. You did binary, that's zeros and one, right? And the best way to paint it is, imagine that we want to write a code. You're a software developer now and you want to write a code. You want to go from year to year. And you want to program this machine to go from year to year. So let's assume that to take one step forward is one, but to take a right turn is zero. So we have to take 7 steps. So let's assume now, okay, this is the code. So step 1 is 1, of course. Then step 2, another 1. Step 3, another 1. Then step 4 is 0, one step to the left. Then by going forward, step 1, and step 1. We've arrived at the destination. Now you can see that on your screen, you can see you have 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, then 1, 1, 1, 1. That itself, that 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, those 7 strings of zeros and 1 is a code. You just program a robot to move from step 1 to step 2. And that is a very big overview, but if you look at it, that's like the foundation of how like software development actually works. You're just giving like a computer like a series of instructions to perform on your behalf, right? And now let's take that one to like a higher level. But like, how if the computers understand zeros and one, but we human beings, we are not that great with memorizing like that huge series of numbers, right? For example, like if you go to Google now, it is easier for you to remember google.com, facebook.com, amazon.com, twitter.com, instagram.com, but the actual IP address are made up of numbers. It can be something like 192.168.134.601. But if I told you to start memorizing those series of numbers, it's very hard for you to do. So that's what gave birth to machine language and human language. So machine language is made up of zeros and one. I know things are already getting complicated and stuff like that. But like I said earlier, just stay with me. So machine language are made up of zeros and ones. So the computer can only understand a on and a off states. That's that binary code that we talked about. But we human beings, we understand English, we understand math, we have logic and stuff like that. You know, we understand emotions and all. But computers only understand zeros and one. So a machine language is zeros and one, but that's the machine language. But the high level languages are the ones that we use. You probably might have heard of Python before, or JavaScript, you know, frameworks like React Native, Go, and whatever, and so on and so forth. So like those are like the basic things like when it comes to software like development. But the thing is that like what developers do is they memorize the syntax. Okay, for example, if I want to say 2 plus 2, so let's say for example, if I want to do like this, let me give you an example of a code. I want to get, I want to multiply two numbers. So I can easily tell the computer that, okay, you know what, x is a variable, y is a variable, and asterisk is multiplication. So if you take 2 times 2, so if I put, anywhere I put x is equals to 2, y equals to 3. So by the time you input those variables there, it'll give you a result all the time. So all those kind of syntaxes are the things that like engineers are, like they've taken their time, they've understood it. So like they've understood it, right? But the thing is that as time goes on, right, we started to have like, okay, we started to divide the internet, like the entire like development into different frameworks. So I would like define those frameworks like with an example, right? So let's say for example now, we have like a physical part of the computers, like that's the hardware and stuff like that. But we also have like the part of the computer that we the human beings can interact with and see. If you have like, let me say for example, you have like WhatsApp, right? You have like the home screen, the chat section, all those things are the things that you can see. But guess what? Once you send a message to someone, what happens? You don't, just like the other person gets the message. Like those are like the parts that you cannot see. So there's something called like the client, there's something called the server, and there's something called the database. So what does that mean? So a client is like, oh, that part of WhatsApp that you are interacting with. So let's say for example, like your phone, your laptop and stuff like that. But a database is where informations are stored. So let's say for example, if you send somebody a picture or a message, don't forget that you can always see that message on your phone. And even though you delete your WhatsApp or you migrate your WhatsApp from another phone to another phone, you discover that you can always have access to that data. So where data are stored is called database. I know it's already sounding like very technical, but don't worry. Just remember there are three things. The physical part, the part of the technology that you can see, that's like the front end, you understand, the client side, the front end, the UI, those pictures, videos, images, and stuff that you can see. But the part where they are stored is called the database. And there's something also called the server, right? The server is where those informations are processed. That sounds very, I know. So just understand that there's a client, there is a server, and there's a database. So if you understand that, then that would create like a framework for how we would continue to explain like different things as we go on. Now, that being said, so let me talk about like the client side. So there's something called HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now this is just like a basic overview, right? So HTML are the text part of the computer that you can see. Let me give you an example of what HTML is. The text, anything like text that you can see on like the computer screen, the letters, the names, the things you type out, the person's bio, the person's name on your WhatsApp, or the person's name on your Instagram or whatever. Those are like HTML. Like HTML just means hypertext markup language, right? And it's something called CSS. So CSS is called cascading style sheet. Don't worry, you don't need to memorize this thing. What it just means is a cascading style sheet helps like developers to design. Do you understand? So if the website were only made up of text, so if you look at your screen now, a website like that is made up of only text. But it's not beautiful now. So for you to add colors, pictures, let me not say pictures, but for you to add colors like animation, beautify it, make it round, make it look beautiful, that's where CSS comes in. So like HTML is like you writing out the text, CSS is like you making it bold or underlining it or adding some colors to it. So that kind of had flavors to it. So those are like primarily the client side, right? So let us now go to the server. So the server is like the place where most of all these things happen. Right. So what do I mean by that? A server is where all those informations are processed. For example, on your phone, like I used earlier, like if you're playing game, your phone is locally mostly doing most of the processing. If it's a local game, that's why your system is getting hot. But if you're working over the internet, right, the server is processed somewhere else. the informations are processed like somewhere else. Do you understand? So like as that's what like the server is. The server is in an overview is the place where like most of these informations are processed. Hope that makes sense. How do I do it? I think the perfect example of this is you go to a restaurant, right? Right. Okay, let me explain database and I'll use an analogy to explain it to you. So database is just, like I said earlier, it's just places where the information are being stored. So just so that there's a client, there's a server, and there's a database. Client is what the user see. Server is where the informations are processed. Database is where the informations are stored. Client is example of like, I told you about like some clients. So I told you about HTML, CSS for like styling things. Then I also talked about like the server side is where like informations are being processed. Do you understand? And then we have like things like storage. Do you understand? Storage is where like, okay, my informations are being stored in. I think the best example to explain this is if you go to a restaurant. So when you go to a restaurant, you sit down with your babe or with your family members or with your loved ones, and they give you the menu. You see what they have. You can see that as HTML. You see what they have. Where now, if you make an order for the food, right, if it's a very fine dining fancy restaurant, or even though it's Mama Put, the waiter or whoever is taking your order goes to the kitchen and they process your order, right? So if it's a fine dining, they make the food, you have to wait for them to make the food, and once they are done, they bring it back. Do you see what I mean now? Once they are done, they bring it back. So you see that they have to go and process your order first before they bring the food back to you. So that place where that thing is being processed is what we call like the server, is where you process the information. You don't just go to a restaurant and you sit down and at the point that you're making the order, like what's this thing called? The waiter himself is the one just giving you the food like that. So you have to go somewhere where they will make the food and bring it to you. Or if they've made it down, at least they'll just put the food together, they'll put it on a plate and they'll bring it back to you. So no matter how you spin it, you see that someone had to go and process your order before they bring it back to you. So that's like the server that does that kind of thing. So what is the database? So don't forget like that Mama Put or that fine dining restaurant, they had to buy like the rice, the noodles, the whatever things like the spaghetti, whatever things, the stew, the pepper that they need to use to make the stew and stuff like that. They have to buy it and store it like in a pantry or somewhere. So those places that those things are stored is what they call like a database. So I hope like that these kind of gives us like a basic overview of like what like software like development like is. And so like what then is now vibe coding? So before like developers had to like store like those syntax, they had to memorize like how to create like a div or HTML, CSS, they had to memorize those things. But what vibe coding did is that it changed like everything. So vibe coding was like, okay, you know what, instead of me memorizing the syntax are like, okay, instead of me memorizing HTML, CSS, how to create a style, how to write like a header, a title, and stuff like that, what the vibe coding did was it just changed everything. All you need to do is speak to the computer in your own language. It knows what to do. Like I told you, that's why I started with the beginning. Like, I told you about like zeros and one, right? But like we human beings were not great at, you understand, that's zeros and one, right? It's computers that are great at stuff. So that's why we invented things that they call like high-level language. That's like the likes of the Python, the JavaScript, and stuff like that, right? So, but we now took it further. You know what? We've been able to talk to computers by understanding syntax. Why can't we just talk to the computers like the way I want it to be? So let's say, for example, if I want to write a piece of code before, and I want to write like, let's say, for example, the text, I have to open like if you look at your screen now, you have to open like a terminal like that, right? Or let's say, for example, I want to make the text bold, I have to write like a class name or CSS, go to my CSS and write, I want the text to be bold, or I want the background to be green, and I just have to write background or BG red, or stuff like that, right? But what vibe coding did is, instead of you memorizing those syntax, or I need to know what header is, title is, I need to understand like different CSS for background, for stuff like that, I could just talk to the computer in my own natural language, and the computer does what executes that. An example of that is, let's say for example, if you look at your screen, right, this is like what I would have done if I went to do it like as a developer, right? That's what I would have done. But now if I go to like, let's say ChatGPT or whatever, Claude, Lovable and stuff like that, I just like, you know what, create like a code for an header for me, right? And the AI just brings that out. So those are like the two differences, right? About like how development and vibe coding has changed that. So what vibe coding just did is vibe coding made it easier for non-technical people, even technical people, to write code faster. So instead of you memorizing the syntax and how do I write HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, stuff like that, vibe coding just lets you write those things without having to memorize like those syntax, and it makes like development very faster and very efficient. And all this vibe coding thing literally started like 2024, 2025. So it's still very early, and it's the best time to join in. And as time goes on, you can actually move faster with that. And some people say that, oh, like, but that's not real coding. But it is actually coding, but at a different level. Instead of you understanding syntax, you are spending more time, you understand, just describing the problem to the computer, and the computer knows exactly what to do. Right, and if you look at it, like that's how it has been. Well, have you probably heard of COBOL, Pascal? Then we went to Java, JavaScript, Python. We have React Native, Go. So as technology continues to evolve, like we continue to find creative ways to build software faster and more efficient. So like that's how like vibe coding has helped like development of technology in recent time. So in vibe coding, there's something called prompting. So prompting is where you tell the AI to do things for you, right? So I tell the AI, okay, you know what, create a website for me with this, or you know what, create like a particular code section. I want to put it in my code, or I can set the artificial intelligence to do A or B or C or D or F. So the artificial intelligence already has domain, at least a good amount of knowledge in that area. So when I tell it to do something, it knows exactly what to do, or most of the time, it knows what to do. So, but as time goes on, we'll talk about like prompting, prompt engineering, hallucination. Yeah, hallucination is like, yeah, the AI too can make mistakes. So yeah, be prepared for that too as well. So, but that's like the basic overview of the current class that we have. So I think most of the things that we've discussed today is the foundation of like technology, and how like transistors have like an on and off state, and the zeros and one, and how we've gone from zeros and one to understanding what's this thing called, how like HTML, CSS, as high level languages, Java, JavaScript, stuff like that. But as we as human beings have also evolved to now start to understand, like, okay, we know we could just prompt, tell the AI exactly what we want, and AI will build it instead of us memorizing those syntax and stuff like that. Yeah, have a good one. And I think so. What we do in our next class is we'll be doing setting up. So we'll be setting up different AI tools like Cursor, Lovable, ChatGPT, Gemini, how to do prompting, and so on and so forth. And see you in the next class. And bye.